Welcome to The Landscape, George Smith Partners podcast. Welcome, everyone, to The Landscape. This is George Smith Partners podcast. My name is Evan Kinne. I'm the CEO of Access Capital and also a managing director at George Smith Partners. Today, we have a very special guest, Mr. Alain R'bibo. Just in case people are living under a rock, Alain Matkins, preeminent West Coast-based law firm, especially in real estate. Alain has a tremendous amount of experience and I think has worked on over $3 billion of acquisitions and dispositions. He practices, I'll let him jump into what he practices specifically because I don't want to mess it up, but for sure he's been doing this for a long time and I'm excited to have you on. I think we'll have a great talk today and learn a little bit about your business, learn a little bit about what you're seeing in the market today. And I'd love to talk a little bit specifically about Los Angeles and some of the challenges with some of the policies in the city, and maybe get a little bit of an idea from you about what might be some simple things that we could see legislators do to make housing a little bit less costly and maybe transactional volume pick up. So, without further ado, I'm very happy to have you here today. Let's just dive right into it.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. So before we get into like the details, why don't you give us a little bit of background? Like who are you and what's your expertise?
Yeah. So Alain R'bibo, real estate partner here at Alain Matkins. Believe it or not, April of 2026, where we're at now, marks my 20th year at the firm, 20th year in commercial real estate. My start date at the firm was April 3rd, 2006. And frankly, I've never looked back. It's been an unbelievable experience for me. The opportunity to work alongside the best in the business, not only my colleagues here at the firm, but also our clients. I consider them to be the best operators, developers, owners, users in the country, in the world. So I've just learned a lot, have had the opportunity to work on tremendous deals, learn, grow, but also mentor and train the next generation. It's been an unbelievable run. So 20 years into the game, my area of expertise as a real estate transactional lawyer, I spend 90% of my time focused on purchase and sale, joint venture, and leasing, right? That's for office, retail, industrial, multifamily, all across the country. Of course, we have a heavy emphasis here in California. We have 5 offices, but 3 years ago, we launched our office in New York, which is doing very well. And we've got some exciting announcements with further expansion coming up there in the next few weeks. So New York is doing very well, up to 15 lawyers there in just 3 years. And the idea was to take our brand, to take our market expertise, our relationships, our industry knowledge in real estate, and basically take everything that we've cultivated over 50 years and bring that out to New York so that we had a head start. And things are going really well. So I say if you want to be a real estate lawyer, doing that at Alain Matkins is a tremendous privilege, a huge opportunity. I literally love what I do every day.
So you didn't start as a real estate lawyer. But you kind of pivoted into it, right? So what made you want to get into this business, sticks and bricks?
Yeah. I actually started out as a bankruptcy restructuring lawyer, and that just coincidentally was because I happened to do well in my bankruptcy class in law school, and my professor wrote me a letter of recommendation and pointed me in the direction of a job opening. And before I knew it, I was a bankruptcy lawyer, but definitely not what I was intending to do. But just after a few years, I definitely knew that I wanted to be in real estate for a variety of reasons. I thought that I could build a book of business around my community. And I did that. I transitioned after 3 years of being that was actually litigation related work, right? So I found myself in court, which I didn't mind at all, but really wanted to be on the business side, on the real estate side. And again, that was 20 years ago. It made sense for me to be in real estate just because everybody I knew was a owner, a builder, a developer, a tenant, right? Real estate touches so many different people. I thought it'd be a great way to build up my practice, and it's been an unbelievable opportunity.
So I would imagine that most of your work is on specific real estate transactions, right? So working with your client, whether they're the lender or the buyer or the equity, et cetera, and so so on and so forth. But let's walk through like what differentiates, you think, Alan Matkins and your practice versus some of the other competition that you see in the market?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's just no comparison in terms of the scope of representation and the depths of the relationships that we have in the market, the expertise. I like to say that Alan Matkins is it's like a toy store for real estate operators, right? Under one roof, I'm not aware of another firm that will do your purchase and sale and your leasing and your joint venture and your finance and your land use and entitlements and your environmental and your construction. And, unfortunately, if you have a dispute with your partner, we'll handle that litigation too. We'll do your real estate tax. I don't think it exists. I say that there are many, many great real estate lawyers out there in the country, and there are great real estate departments. But in terms of real estate firms where everything revolves around our real estate business, um, very, very few and far between. I think that distinguishes us, and our clients know that. That's why they seek us out specifically.
So let's dive into that a little bit more. So, what outside of the transaction do you focus on, maybe personally, and how do you think you separate yourself from? Let's dive in just a little bit, one layer deeper there. Like, are you taking like
Yeah.
a more advisory approach with your clients? What's the ticket?
Yeah, we're solving problems, right? So I got a call a couple of weeks ago, and it was very much, it was a call that was out of the blue. They said, "Hey, I heard that you might be able to figure this out for us or to solve it for us." It's not a transactional issue at all. It is a real estate issue, and they said, "Look, we've got to identify the right person. We've got to get somebody's attention on this." When you have a proverbial Rolodex, the way that I do, the way that my partners do here, we're one phone call away from solving really hard, complex problems. We also have experience in terms of knowing how it's going to play out. So in that case, there's litigation pending. There's a dispute going on. We're trying to sidestep all of that, right? We're very, very entrepreneurial, very deal focused. I mean, litigation sometimes cannot be avoided, but at every step, we are focusing on the business of our clients and trying to get this figured out. And part of figuring it out is knowing how things will unfold, right? We know what is going to happen here. So let's pick up the phone and try to resolve this. And we did that. And that particular situation is still ongoing, but it just speaks a little bit to the kind of phone calls that we get, right? I have a problem, or I have an opportunity. I need to figure this out, or I need capital, or I need a developer. It's way, way more than working on a deal by deal basis. I mean, I consider ourselves an extension of our clients. um, we're their partners, right? They're calling us up. They're trusting us with, again, opportunities, their most critical situations, and we're side by side with them, shoulder to shoulder, in figuring it out and capitalizing on these opportunities. And so you do that over decades. And very, very hard to replace. It's not just going to a lawyer and say, "Can you handle this purchase and sale agreement?" It's saying, "I've done 50 of these deals for you. I'm not going to take up your time, right? I'm going to call you with 3 issues because I know how these other 47 issues should resolve themselves." That's super valuable, right? I'm not taking up your time. You're not on the phone redlining. I'm not sending you an issues list that you don't want to look at. All of these things speak to efficiency and just deal making that I think is very hard to find in the marketplace.
So I think that's kind of music to my ears. I know this is a trend. I don't know if it's a real thing. There's no way for me to quantify this, but it seems that post COVID, no offense, but it seems like attorneys involved in transactions are sort of the tail wagging the dog. At least that's been my experience. It's like, I go through the
Yeah.
pipeline with all in our, with our investment funds, or on the George Smith side with the capital markets professionals, or with our lender. And almost in every case, it's like, well, the attorney for so and so said such and such, and or they have the documents for the last 3 weeks, and blah blah blah, right?
Right.
So, what is it like? Why is this the case today? Or is it just something that is an artifact of where we're at in the real estate cycle, the economic cycle? Is it, is there just a greater risk of litigation today? Like, what has happened in the last? I guess it's been like 5 or 6 years now since COVID, so kind of crazy. But
Yeah.
what's happened?
Well, I also think it's a function of where you currently stand and your platform, where GSP stands, right? As you guys get more and more institutional, you get bigger and bigger. You're doing bigger things. You're doing more complex things. You're forming funds. You're dealing with loans of a certain size. The number of lawyers in the room is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger, and that's just a way of life. But I will say that lawyers should never be the main event of any deal, honestly. If a lawyer's in the room and is there's any kind of grandstanding or they're the main event, something is wrong there, right? The lawyers are there to facilitate the deal, to execute on the vision of the parties, right? Show up, focus on what matters, and move on. I think that given that we have real estate in our blood, we understand that time kills deals. I don't think the whole legal industry understands that, right? It might be fund related work. Maybe those fund lawyers are not real estate lawyers. Maybe you've got corporate lawyers in the room. You've got litigators. They are not kind of born and bred real estate lawyers day in and day out. But the mantra that has just been pounded into us for decades from our clients: time kills deals, focus on what matters, let's do what we do and move on. There's no substitute for walking into the room with that ethos. And I think that kind of keeps us focused on getting the deal done.
So Alan Matkins, long-standing history in commercial real estate, especially on the West Coast. Somehow you guys got involved with UCLA Anderson. You guys are the sort of co-sponsor or co-originator of the Anderson Forecast, which is a highly cited commercial real estate survey, particularly in California and on the West Coast. So what is it about that makes the UCLA Anderson Forecast with Alan Matkins special?
Yeah, so I'm actually not aware of anything else like it in the country. We've been doing it for I don't know how many years at this point. Very, very long standing. And in tandem with the Ziman Center and the Anderson School. So what we like about it is that it's not just a survey that's put out by a brokerage firm or something like that, but it is really put out at the highest academic levels, right? Going out to a broad array of our real estate clients, really taking the temperature on real estate markets and where their sentiment is going to be. And year after year, when we see that, it has been very valuable in gauging where sentiment is around our market. So it's also an opportunity for us to connect with our clients. They really appreciate the opportunity to have a voice in terms of what they're seeing on the ground. And so every year just gets, more and more polished in terms of the value that it provides to the community. So the feedback that we get is really positive around it. But we really appreciate our partnership in that. And we know that it means a lot to our clients and to the market as well.
Yeah. And the latest survey showed California kind of entering 2026 with some cautious optimism. California is a big, big place. And so, let's talk a little
Yeah.
bit about what you're seeing with respect to Los Angeles specifically, and what some of the measures that have been passed in the last 5 or so years have done to transactions and transactional volume. And let's start there, and maybe we can unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think there's any secret that Measure ULA passed a few years ago, which was termed as the mansion tax, right? I think a lot of voters have buyer's remorse on that now that we know that it actually went way, way broader than that and had a significant chilling effect on the overall market. It's crazy how this was not just about mansions at all. This was about
Oh,
any commercial transaction over $5 million. It put a major, major wet blanket over the entire commercial real estate sector. So I know that there's been a number of initiatives for the last few years trying to roll that back, trying to modify it to something that was closer to its intended consequences. But ULA for sure has been super painful. And we're hopeful of a variety of initiatives that are out there right now that are going to, remove that extra dead weight on the commercial real estate sector. But we've absolutely noticed a slowdown, and there's been all kinds of structuring and additional transaction costs that have been needed in order to navigate that legislative framework. So a lot of these things sound good on paper and they have lots of unintended consequences. And this is a perfect example of that.
Right. So, you've represented some of the biggest names in institutional real estate. So, when you're sitting across the table from principal investors and whatnot, what are we seeing today that is unique? What type of deal terms are you seeing that maybe you didn't see a couple years ago? And what's being highly negotiated today?
Yeah. Well, for a while, the last couple of years have been very, very challenging in the real estate market. If we're being totally honest, compared to the deal volume that we saw, in the prior decade with low interest rates, the inflationary environment and the interest rate environment have been very, very painful to the overall market. Nevertheless, over the last, I would say, 18 months, when we saw that little, 25 bips reduction in interest rates, we saw that as a little bit of a boost in the arm, and a lot of players who had been sitting on the sidelines for the last couple of years finally coming in to transact. But what we're seeing then are you still have significant challenges in terms of financing around different asset classes. That's why we find that the most active players right now are really family offices, those that have large war chests sitting patiently on the sidelines, but most importantly, those that have a long runway, right? They don't have investors that they answer to. They don't have a 3 to 5 year or even a 7 year exit. They can go out and buy a downtown LA office tower and sit on it for a generation when they're buying it for 10 or 20 cents on the dollar. So increasingly what we're seeing in terms of deal making right now is that those showing up with capital, being very aggressive in terms of terms, not needing a whole lot of diligence, not needing a whole lot of inspection time. However, they're also going to expect very aggressive pricing on a lot of these assets that haven't received attention in a long time. But it's no secret that certain sectors of the economy continue to perform well, like retail, industrial has held up, multifamily has held up. Office is still struggling significantly. And I was just on a call earlier today and saying that one of the biggest challenging is finding financing for office. There's been a
Oh
big
yeah,
push in terms of
absolutely.
talking about, yeah, they're talking about AI and people coming off of work from home. There is still a tremendous glut of office product out there, B-class office, where we have a lot of work to do to absorb all that space over the coming couple of years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any green shoots you see for the office in downtown LA, or just wait and see, like you said, gets, these
We're seeing
wealthy.
deals, right?
Yeah. Well,
We're
I
seeing
guess if you're seeing deals,
transactions. It is
yeah,
wealthy family offices.
yeah. It's not a
Well,
place for
Evan, let me
institutional
ask you this:
investors.
are you making loans on office right now in
Yeah, we
downtown
just did a
LA?
ground up office development loan in South Florida. But other than that,
Okay.
it's pretty sparse. And, I think that there is some
Yeah.
wait and see from uh everybody, right? What's gonna happen with return to office was pretty good and helpful, I think, but it's more nuanced, particularly here in Southern California, where, up until last year, we had a bit of a slowdown in population growth in California, which, for 150 years had positive net migration, et cetera. So you kind of need some of these dynamics to continue to really place those bets. And particularly with
Yeah.
AI and whatnot, it also brings in sort of another wait and see. Obviously, we are seeing a lot of activity up in San Francisco, which is really helped along by the, sort of the being at the epicenter of where a lot of foundational model companies are based or have major offices, et cetera. So I'd like to also, you mentioned
Yeah. We.
industrial. Yeah, okay. Go ahead. What are you gonna say?
Yeah. No, I was going to talk about the San Francisco office market for a minute because I happen to love San Francisco right now. I remember being there a year ago, maybe longer, like 18 months, and I was calling up, some of my friends, some of my clients, and saying, "You guys really need to be down here right now because there's some underreported activity going on." And before you know it, we started seeing office trade there at significant discounts together with absorption. So, that market is looking very interesting to me right now over the next couple of years. And people think that it's just about AI and AI companies. It's not just about AI. I think AI is making every company up there more productive. They're adding new divisions, they're hiring more employees, they're seeing more opportunity, and all of that bodes well for office absorption. So it's not just a handful of AI firms that like all they do is AI. AI is really being overlaid onto so many different industries and different companies up there that I just think overall it's kind of a new shot in the arm in terms of demand for office. So I really, really like the San Francisco market right now.
Yeah. And also, no secret, but rents have been shooting up through the roof in San Francisco. We're doing several transactions right now in our firm involving multifamily in San Francisco, and the rent
Yeah.
growth is staggering. It depends on how
Right.
you measure it, you know, but it's definitely happening. It's tough to bet against these major cities over the long run. So, hopefully we continue to see San Francisco sort of clean itself up. That would be great.
Yeah.
Um,
But by the way,
Go
it's
ahead.
not
Yeah.
just all major cities are not created equal. I think it's an important point where years ago they said, "Hey, Austin, Texas, we'll create a Silicon Valley there, or Nashville,
Right.
Tennessee, or Phoenix, or whatever else." It's super hard to recreate. I would go as far as saying that it's impossible to recreate Silicon Valley. You will never have that concentration of capital, experience, talent all in one place. And so I think for a variety of reasons, it could be economic, could be political, that market might come and go. It will never be replaced. And as soon as there's a new trend, as there is now in AI, you should expect that, all of Silicon Valley and San Francisco is going to always benefit from that kind, because it's not like that kind of progress can really happen anywhere else. It's just not comparable to any other market.
I was just seeing the same anecdote in other markets. So, for example, if you look at other cities around the world that sort of control and dominate a given industry, it's sort of very similar, right? An example would be Taiwan. Not to get into geopolitics, it's out of my scope. But the reason why everyone's
Right.
talking about Taiwan so much is it's very similar to Silicon Valley in that, I'm going to get the statistics wrong, but such a majority of, for sure, all the high end chips are made in Taiwan. And they have all of the engineers, they have all the suppliers of the various components of the chips. They have uh, people that know how to operate the equipment, know
Yeah.
how to build the buildings, know how to do all this stuff. And then even more importantly, like what we've seen in Arizona, right, when we've tried to build them here, we just don't have the infrastructure. Like they can't get the
Right.
chlorine gas in time or whatever. So it's sort of
Right.
similar, like you said. There are some cities and areas around the country and whatnot that just sort of dominate an area, and there's so much infrastructure and so many people that are nuanced uh, components of a complex infrastructure that make it very
Yeah.
difficult to move. And I think you're absolutely seeing that right now with San Francisco. I would like to like shift a tiny bit though into industrial. I think you have a lot of experience there. And industrial, we've heard some choppy headlines over the last 6 to 12 months. What are you seeing? You have some major clients in that space, I think. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing there. Would love to hear it.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, industrial was the darling for a very long time, and we've seen a slight reduction in demand over the last, couple of years. But it is still a very, very strong sector for us. The reality is that there were a number of considerations where, obviously, if you go back historically, the work from home and the pandemic was very strong for industrial because nobody was going into the office. Everybody wanted everything shipped to their home, and that just required a bunch of different distribution and fulfillment centers that previously didn't exist. So all that needed to be created, and there was a huge amount of demand. Once everybody started working back in the office and life got back a little bit more to normal, some of that demand went away, but not really. People still got very used to having everything delivered, and so all of that infrastructure, maybe the demand went down a little bit, but not significantly. There was a story a couple years ago that Amazon had scaled way too quickly in terms of taking down too much space, and that they were maybe giving back space, or maybe they were going to buy some of their own real estate. Um, Overall, I think the sector is still very strong, and I'm not too worried about these momentary blips. You find new markets like Phoenix, for example, which has come out very strong with a lot of investment, and there's new industrial pockets that are popping up all the time. So we think industrial in the right market is still a very strong sector.
Got it. Well, so let's talk a little bit about infrastructure. And I think you've done some infrastructure related projects, et cetera. What's changed in that area? You know, there's obviously that's a very oftentimes a politically, um, it's sort of at the folly of politicians and what they want. So what are we seeing there today, particularly around the changes maybe in policies around EVs in California, et cetera. I know it's a niche, but
Yeah,
I think you might have a
yeah.
little bit of expertise there.
I don't know that we can call EV a niche anymore. Honestly, we're seeing more and more traction. It used to be that EV was very wide scale in terms of consumer level, where you've got, charging infrastructure that's going into buildings, going into gas stations and shopping centers. But what I think has been even more interesting over the last couple of years is commercial EV infrastructure. So you've got firms that are specializing on building out the infrastructure that's going to support fleet commercial trucking, right? That's really exciting, going up and down the 5 corridor as well as other distribution arteries. All of that infrastructure has been built out and is continuing to scale. Over the last 5+ years, there's been a lot of progress that's been made on that. And it's very real. I think if you build it, they will come. And initially, we didn't know if consumers would sign up for this. We now see that Tesla is delivering their electric semis. We see that the charging infrastructure for that has been built out in lots of major corridors. So especially in California, with a lot of focus on, green energy and environmental considerations, California always leads the country on these types of initiatives because that's just part of our ethos. But it also means that we're first in developing the technology, which ultimately rolls out to the rest of the country. I think something to keep your eye out increasingly is going to be the way that electric charging infrastructure at the commercial level starts rolling out across the country. Very excited to see how that plays out. But there's already
So,
been a lot of
so will
progress in
those,
California.
yeah, on those projects, are we going to see larger energy storage infrastructure type projects on those sites as part of those, or what do you think we'll see?
There's been a lot of talk over the years of how do we make that last mile infrastructure even more user friendly. So if you go to an EV platform for all this distribution, ideally you want these industrial centers that already exist to also provide charging. So maybe we've explored putting solar fields on the roofs of these massive industrial projects, or if you've got land adjacent to the industrial project, how do you create a solar field there? Of course, you can tie into the utility, but from a cost perspective and also a capacity perspective, sometimes that hasn't been the most feasible approach. So projects that we've worked on have always been a combination of both utility based, but also solar field based, which is really exciting. So
And
the
and
last
and the
mile
solar field's
infrastructure has been
behind
built
the
out.
meter. The solar
Um,
field, you're saying in some cases might be behind the meter, Alan,
Yeah, yeah. The the
as they're
the,
saying.
sol- the solar fields will be built out by the infrastructure provider, if you will, by the charging provider. We've represented those groups where they build out the charging infrastructure, but there's a solar field there. They have elected not to connect to a utility in many cases. So that's just a whole new way of thinking about it. I'll also put one thing out there where increasingly in Los Angeles, where people have complained about the ability to get power. We've seen some charging operators using generators with natural gas. So natural gas is converting that into electrical power because natural gas is plentiful and inexpensive. So where there's demand, you just see all kinds of creative engineering come about to meet that demand.
As a consumer, I can tell you, it's amazing. I just drove this weekend up to Monterey and back my electric car, and I did a bike ride. I'm avid hobbyist cyclist. I'm
Yeah.
not any good at it, but I went up there to do a bike race, and I've owned various electric car brands, and it's incredible. I mean, you can go anywhere now and it's very easy. A lot of places have, 350 kilowatt charging and it's incredibly fast. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
I mean,
interesting.
fortunately, the fact that again, we happen to be at the epicenter of all this technology. We get to work with the charging side, right? We get to work with the electric vehicle side. We get to work with the autonomous vehicle side. I really, really feel fortunate that we are at the epicenter of the coolest type of technology that's happening in the world right now. And they all have real estate needs, right? They need space to build out their solar fields. They need R&D space. They need space to charge vehicles, clean vehicles, whatever it is, store vehicles. That is coming to a theater near you in a very big way, and we happen to be at the forefront of all that with these great companies, and so we're honored to be part of that.
So, what real estate sector or trend is being most underestimated right now, Alan? Like, you're at the bleeding edge. You have
Yeah.
institutional clients doing new things. Like, what are you seeing that maybe, our clients and listeners aren't?
This sounds a little bit like a broken record, but I want to go back to office for a minute, right? There aren't new types of real estate that are being created. People ask me that all the time. I'm like, guys, office, retail, industrial, multifamily, hospitality,
Right.
storage, okay, co-working. Like there isn't a new sector really that I'm
Right.
seeing, which is the greatest thing. But I want to emphasize that I do think that there is a ton of money to be made in office over the next decade. It is gathering dust right now. Building systems are being, neglected, are becoming obsolete. They're
Totally.
rusting out, and there's value that's being lost there. If you have the stomach, if you have an appetite, find a great building in a great market. And even if you are at vacancy levels that make you uncomfortable, if you can ride this out, I think there's tremendous amount of untapped value there right now.
So, you've been doing this for a long time, and I'm sure, you're growing your firm. What advice do you have for maybe up and coming aspiring real estate attorneys
Yeah,
that
for
might be
sure.
listening to this? Yeah.
Yeah. What I think has been helpful for me is that I was always very, very curious about the business of real estate. When I see lawyers who really are removed from the business of real estate, who don't speak the language, who don't really kind of get into the nitty gritty of a model and a pro forma, how can you advise your client if you don't understand their business? I don't understand that. But increasingly, I see lawyers across from me, and they'll say something like, I love this, like, that's a business point. Yes, it is a business point, but you've also been doing this for 30 years and you ought to be able to advise your client on where this should land out from a business perspective. I'm not talking about a rental rate or something like that, but just too often lawyers are punting. My advice to lawyers that are just getting into real estate is you got to drink up everything that you can from the business side of real estate. Learn the language, learn the business, learn how your clients spend their time all day. And then you could become this really, really important advisor and part of the team. That has been, I'm very honored and flattered when I get calls for business strategy, problems. It's not like, hey, can you review this lease or can you review this NDA or whatever else? That's a very, very narrow scope of representation. I want to be in the room when hard things are being figured out, and there's only one way to do that, which is to do the work and really get knowledgeable.
Great advice. All right. So, where do people find out more about you?
People should go to our website, alanmatkins.com. People can find me on LinkedIn, pretty active on LinkedIn. And we just launched a new podcast a couple of weeks ago. We just had our first episode. I called it AUM because I wanted to distinguish it from, lots of other real estate that might be out there. This isn't for single family. It's not even for, duplexes or triplexes. This is institutional real estate. How the biggest and best operators, owners, developers in the country, how they do deals, having conversations with them. And so far, we've had some really, really great feedback.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on the landscape today. It was great having you here.
Appreciate the
And for our
opportunity.
listeners, don't forget to go to gspartners.com and sign up for FinFacts there.